This is Pay to Play, Ethics and Expenditures in Publishing. Thank you. It looks like our chat is working. Just a quick note, if you type something into the chat over on the side, you will get a response from me. Unfortunately, I'm just flying solo today. I don't have the rest of my team here in the back end with me. So I'm on a slight 20, 30-second delay. I will see your chat comments and questions. Now, I'm guessing you're not really here just for the chat, however nice that might be. I'm guessing you might be here, though, because you're concerned about unethical behavior in publishing and how it might affect you. Okay, so that's probably your main reason. You might also be here because you heard about or are supporting the All Access Con campaign over on Indiegogo. In either event, thank you for being here. Welcome. And first, though, as this is a discussion of ethics, let me just put a little ethical thing out there and say that, while I'm excited to have so many people here with us, I see a bunch of attendees already jumped in. It needs to be clear that everything I say here today, it's me, my personal experience as an author, as a freelance editor, somebody who's worked for multiple publishing companies. I'm not here pushing anything or any views or representing anything from any other company or organization that I've been involved with. So just having said that, if you find yourself, thinking maybe you need some legal advice, or maybe you're in a situation already where you have a lawyer or want a lawyer, you probably need to talk to a lawyer. Okay, I can give some advice based on my professional experience, my professional opinions. But also, having said that, one final point is that while I'm affiliated with a bunch of products and projects and things, we have a lot of ground to cover in a very short amount of time. So if we can save any questions or anything about specific products until later on, or outside of this presentation, I'd appreciate it. If that all sounds good, we can really get started with things. First, you will notice the format here is a bit different than previously. First and foremost, probably because it is working, unlike last week's absolute disaster. That was terrible. We won't speak of it again, but I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're able to see things. If you're able to see things, just please let me know over in the chat. And yeah, clearly we're going to have to leave some sort of indication in the main reception area for navigation to let people know to click on the main stage. Thank you, Squirrel, for pointing that out. So that was an oversight on our part. Now, let's see. Next of all, let's see, the All Access Con experience. Yes, that's the next thing. So you'll see that's different, right? We have the main stage, we have a networking area, which that's really cool. It's a good function that we're looking forward to getting some use out of here today, and also at our next event tomorrow afternoon from 2 to 5. What is it and how does it work? Okay, networking is something where you can interact directly one-on-one with another attendee. You're sort of matched up at random by the system. So if you want to connect and continue the discussion further outside of this area, it will save the person's credentials if you so desire. If not, There is no obligation to connect with these people and further the discussion on other social networks or what have you. Right now, I think the minimum time set for these networking sessions is 30 seconds with I think a 3-minute maximum on that. But just a reminder that you should please treat the networking experience as just the same as you would a real world flesh and blood industry event, right? In the way you would interact with somebody in person. All right, so great. Hope you have fun with that. And now let's turn our focus back to pay to play. So what we're supposed to be talking about here today, what types of operations exist in publishing? What can you get from them? How can they hurt you? We'll be talking about trade publishers, university presses, self-publishing, and the so-called hybrid publishers. We'll discuss what the differences are, my personal experiences with them, and just generally defining what your goals are in this industry. The reason we're doing this is following the recent uproar relating to other ethical issues in publishing over the past few weeks, all centered around a particular publisher in Canada. In the last week, people began really strongly taking umbrage with something called reading fees. So I thought maybe we could shine a little light on that and see what's going on there. And just so everybody is on the same page, everybody understands what reading fees are, what we're talking about there is usually contests or competitions, but also sometimes just general submissions to a company where you submit a manuscript and there's a reading fee attached. This can be something small like $3 or $5 fee, $10, $15, or higher, depending. Usually this is put down as an administrative fee. So the general consensus is among a lot of writers' organizations and a lot of working writers out there, money always flows to the author. You'll see this phrase a lot. So what this looks like in practice, pay to play and reading fees. There are different submission engines online to automate the submission process and make things easier and much more transparent on both ends. You can see the time that your submission has been with somebody. You have a more direct line of communication. But some of these submission services, they do charge the publisher or whoever is receiving the manuscript, they charge them some money to maintain the service. And, in terms of pay to play, I hadn't even thought about this until I started talking about it. I've been doing this so long that it used to be you always had to send something by the post through the snail mail. And if you were sending something international, you had to include international reply coupons, which, you could be talking about an extra, I don't know, $5 on top of the regular printing and shipping costs. You wanted to put in all of your submissions, domestic and international, an envelope with postage on it. Most of the time, in my experience, they would just return like your first page because, you would recycle and reuse manuscripts. Also, you didn't want them to have the manuscript on hand for whatever nefarious use they might get up to. Usually, though, they would just take the postage. And I, in my correspondence with some publishers, did see they were using stamps that were cut off of other envelopes with that portion of the envelope pasted onto the new envelope to cover their correspondence with you. So, it's under a different name now, under a different guise. But there's always been some, it feels like to me, always been some aspect of pay to play in terms of these competitions and things, contests, where money is expected up front as a processing cost. That has always existed too. In this day and age, with electronic communications, do we really need to be charging these fees, though? I'm not sure. What do you think? May you drop a line there in the chat here, and say, if you think that email service providers being for the large part free these days, if these costs should be if that should continue. While you're considering that, while you're thinking about it, I want to share with you something. It relates to my very first acceptance, my very first piece of writing that I put out there as a fiction author. As some of you who are familiar with me know, I was first involved in screenwriting and then writing articles for hire. And I should have gotten this down off my wall here previously, but this is the acceptance letter from Fiction International. It's on the SDSU letterhead. It comes from the editor-in-chief there, Harold Jaffe. It's dated January 3rd, 2001. And it's good news. It's an acceptance. He says, congratulations, your text virtually deserves it. The narrative unfurls. Unfurls is not really the word. Something suggesting torrential would be more accurate. Your text is, in fact, infused with energy. That is one of its virtues. The other is the language, which characterizes the speakers. The language moves with a life of its own, countering logic, distorting meanings, even parading for its own sake. The result is a peculiar sort of pathos comedy, which is impressive. The writing throughout is supple and efficient. If this text is representative, you are a strong writer, indisputably, and we wish you the best of luck. Now, who wouldn't want that acceptance letter? I mean, even years later, almost 20 years later, it feels pretty good to see those words on the page from a publishing professional. And especially, as you can imagine, with my first publication and the need for some sort of validation for all the time I was putting in, and the encouragement that sort of is so beneficial early in one's career. I didn't read the beginning, though. Let me skip back to that, because that's kind of crucial here. I have some good news for you. Your story has won second prize in the Fiction International contest. That means that you will receive $150 and publication due out next fall. You'll also be cited on, he lists a bunch of different websites where my text will be cited or even published in whole. This was one of those writing contests where you have to pay $15 to enter. That's how I got my start as a fiction author. So I do have direct experience with this. Fortunately, in this one instance, it was a positive experience. Obviously, that is not always the case. And we'll delve into that in just a moment. But first, I want you to conduct a little exercise here with me. Now, this story earned me $150. And back then, a lot of speculative fiction, the going rate was, I think for professional rates, you were talking 3 to 5 cents per word. And this was 5 cents per word as it came out. once he did the number crunching. So for the $15, I got $150. Now, that's me thinking about my writing. Let's think about your writing. Think of the most recent thing you've had published. And no, it doesn't have to be fiction or poetry. Those are good. It could also be a review that you've written, an article, an interview, a guest blog post, any kind of writing that got published, or even if you haven't published anything yet. If you're here with us, think about something you have written recently. And as long as you're thinking about your writing, that's good. That works. Now, I want you to keep thinking about it while you remove $15 from your wallet, from your pocket, from under your mattress, wherever you keep your money. Just take the $15, put it somewhere where you can see it. Okay, you're doing that. Great. Thank you so much for participating. Now, I want you to count up everything that you've published or written and add another $15 to the pile for every single thing that you've published or written. For my part, after this story came out, I've published over 500 works. I stopped keeping track of it after that. But that would be one heck of an investment, $15 per piece. It doesn't seem sustainable. I mean, for instance, a lot of the flash fiction or poetry that I got published, especially early on, you're talking $2, $5, $10. I would not be making a profit, right? So a lot of this is your goals and what you can leverage based on your goals, right? Like anything, you have to think strategically in this business. For my part, I saw a contest that seemed custom made for me, for my style of writing and for my interests. And for my brand, if I were to move forward having won this contest, saying that I won the contest on this subject would gel really nicely with everything else I was doing at the time. So, did I leverage my victory? Yes. I think 40 or 50 people, if I got the numbers right afterwards, 40 or 50 people entered the contest. And did they carry on? Did they get discouraged? What happened to them? I know a couple others were published alongside myself and the other winning entry. Their material was that strong. They did also, those two authors, go on to get traditional book publishing deals. Now, contests I've judged for other contests for regional writers organizations and conventions, also for our own publishing company and literary journal. The contests for the writers organizations, I think those typically were paid contests where you had to give some sort of entry fee, $10 or $15. The things that we've done personally, we never charged anybody for, but there was never any prize money either. These other contests that I judged for other organizations, there were some decent prizes attached. I know that one winner that I picked for one of these organizations has gone on to win multiple awards. Some of the biggest awards in our industry is now internationally recognized. So they were able to leverage their contest win. Again, though, what happened to all the other people who entered these contests? And I'll tell you, a lot of people enter these contests for regional writers organizations and conventions and things. Were they discouraged? Did they keep going? Sometimes they get feedback. Generally, the feedback is pretty vague, though, because you're covering so many submissions so quickly. But again, we can point to a few instances of people who definitely went on to get traditional publishing deals after these events. But let's talk about that. What is a traditional publishing deal? In terms of how the public generally views a traditional publishing deal, it's you send your work out to a company. The company either lets you know, hey, we can't use this right now, sorry, or hey, let's work together. You get a contract that promises you some money, and you sign it, and the other people go and they make books or magazines or anthologies, whatever has your content in it, right? And you retain your copyright. You're still, in charge of the intellectual property, right? And that's how it's supposed to work. So that is generally how trade publishing does work in practice. There are much finer points than what I just described, but that is more or less the basis of trade publishing. And trade publishing is, geared toward the idea of working authors, making money, working with presses who make commercially viable products that are going out into stores, into libraries, specialty shops, getting into writers groups, that sort of thing. If you think of most publishers you think of will be trade publishers, okay? Then you have university presses, and unless you are in the academic world, you probably don't know about university presses. Somebody who does a lot of research, like an author, might learn about university presses just because they put out so much reference material. But a lot of times, university presses also exist to publish the works for people in their graduate programs. They publish the literary journals affiliated with the various writing programs out there. And also, being published on the university presses, it tends to give professors and people on tenure track jobs an outlet for getting published, which, unlike you and me, as people who are probably in the trade publishing sector, you have to understand, professors getting published, that is a big deal for them. It means a permanent increase often in their pay scale. They could be getting hundreds more every year or thousands more every year based on the strength of having published a book. So that is actually kind of a better deal in the long run than what a lot of authors in the trade sector get for their one book. Of course, at the same time, professors do so much work as teachers and making presentations and contributing to the field of knowledge that they're in, that they don't get to publish as much as we do. So there's a trade-off. That said, I mean, we've probably heard about a lot of tenure track jobs, tenure horror stories, professors who couldn't get fired no matter how they treated their students or other faculty. For instance, I know of a professor who, in order to get published in his literary journal, you had to do things for him like mow his grass, that sort of thing. A lot of the journals and other publications that have reading fees attached to them, things that are not contests, are coming out of the university press, where it is expected that there is some much larger payoff in the end for having these credits, these publication credits. So people coming out of the university system with the whole mindset of, the tenure track and trying to bolster that, but also dealing with this really archaic form of employment where you can't get fired no matter what you do, because yeah, that's tenure thing. We could talk about that that could be a whole other seminar or series. Unfortunately, we do publish a lot of people who are in the academic world, lots of professors, and we're seeing the amount of money there getting thinner and thinner, people not really being able to support themselves there full time with gainful employment. A lot of the universities even going under. One of the people we publish, is internationally known, has done really well as both an author and a professor, but his university went bankrupt and they're gone, and he was out of a job. So you can see this sort of abusive system kind of consuming everything that supports it until it's really starting to consume itself at this point. Compared to all that, reading fees probably don't seem like that big of a deal. To the rest of us working in trade publishing, though, it's pretty unheard of. So when the two things bump up against each other, there's definitely bound to be an outcry. Because from the outside, it looks like a traditional publishing opportunity to people in the trade press. And then we see these fees attached to it. And it kind of, especially on the heels, again, of these last 2 weeks with the other controversy dealing with this other publisher, people are very sensitive to money flowing towards the author right now, not the other way. So people in the university system, it's much more standard. Now, if you recall, in some of the articles that I've been sharing in the ethical publishing community that I established, some of the groundwork for ethics. Doesn't matter if it's lawful, doesn't matter if it's standard, if everybody's doing it. I don't think so. Acceptable and ethical are not exactly the same thing. So we've covered 2 formats of publishing. Let's just quickly skim over the other 2. Self-publishing, well, there's not much to discuss there. You know that in self-publishing, you are laying down a bunch of money and you are then publishing a book without any of the supports of a traditional publisher. There's something that was brought up on the business of publishing panel I was on just last Saturday at the Enoch Pratt Free Library Central Branch in Baltimore, and that was hybrid publishing. Once upon a time back in the day, this was referred to as subsidy publishing. Some of the other names that's currently going under, aside from hybrid publishing, you'll find author-assisted publishing or co-publishing, partnership publishing. All this just means that you are self-publishing, but a lot of the services you would typically pay for as a self-publisher are being offered by this company that you're working with. You don't have to go out and find a freelance editor to cover, the editing. You don't have to find a graphic designer. You don't have to find a cover artist. They'll do extra stuff like publicity things on your behalf, all for a fee, of course. So basically, hybrid publishing is essentially sort of self-publishing on steroids, okay? So, aside from publishing, there are other things to cover. It's pretty well known at this point about agents and fees, but just in case you haven't heard about this before, I'll cover it briefly. There are agents out there who don't really make deals. They're not making money off of selling work on your behalf, making deals with producers or publishers. Instead, they're charging you as the author fees. They won't say administrative, like in the submission process. They'll say that will cover their expenses for getting into events, to make pitches to the big publishers or the big producers and what have you, or it'll cover supplies and other costs, making printouts of your work, all these other things. So that is something that just unequivocally just say, no, don't do that. You want a real agent who's not doing those things. Unfortunately, early in my career, as I said, I was doing screenwriting. I had one of these unscrupulous agents who was charging me fees. Never got any deals. So it doesn't pay off in the end, I can tell you. And it doesn't matter about goals and leveraging. It's just not going to work out. All right. So there are other situations where you have organizations that charge fees for you to pitch to agents, editors, publishers. And that's pretty standard to get you that opportunity. Usually what you're paying for is the whole pre-screening process and making sure you're getting put in front of somebody who is not an unscrupulous kind of individual like I was just describing. Now you can talk about whether that's ethical or not. Again, it's something that's considered standard. I don't know about what your opinion will be. Hey, Sonora, good to see you were able to join us. Thank you. Good to have you here. Yeah, what's your opinion on these charges for pitch sessions at events? Usually it's presented as being an add-on to events, but there are in LA and New York City definitely just conventions that are 100% you not just paying for the entry, but paying on top of that to pitch to as many people as possible, depending on how much you're paying. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's another situation in publishing out here. So in summary, we know about the general opinion from writers' organizations. Money flows to the author. And, there are these 4 different models of publishing. Generally, when you think of publishing, you are talking about the age-old public perception of you submit work and you get a contract back and you sign it and money comes to you magically afterwards, right? So, just moments before I went online here for this webinar, I was just posting on Twitter like, hey, everybody, I'm getting ready to jump into this webinar. See you there. And I saw somebody who's established, but you might know his name from some award wins. He had very recently 2 awards, I believe, at the World Fantasy Awards. Tobias Buckle. And Tobias Buckle, he was posting in reply to an author who was distraught because she had been told by agents, I think, that unless you have paid to get your work professionally edited prior to the submission process, not to bother approaching agents or publishers. And Tobias, established as he is, was looking at that and saying, I wouldn't have a career if I did that, if I had done that. So a lot of people shelling out hundreds of dollars for professional editing, that is a huge barrier to entry. So again, it's about what you can afford, what you can leverage, and primarily what your goals are. If your goal is to make money in this industry, then probably you want to avoid paying a lot of these fees. And definitely, like I said, watch out for those agents who are charging you fees. Is your goal to make money in publishing? If so, type yes in the chat. Let us know. As a personal aside, as I mentioned in the beginning, with that contest that I won, that was a paying thing. That to me didn't feel so weird because I was coming from outside of the traditional publishing space. If I had come to that from being in fiction and poetry and what have you, in the trade publishing, I might have looked at that and said, no way, never. And who knows where I'd be now. I might be further along. I might have given up without getting published. Being a screenwriter, I was entering all these screenplay competitions, which had guaranteed feedback attached to them. And a lot of those were costing $35, $50, $90 in submission fees. I didn't have the money to do a whole lot of those, but I did do some. And I never won. What I did get was a whole lot of really snarky feedback from people who delighted in, tearing apart other people's work. Nothing too useful there. Fortunately, I didn't give up. A lot of people do after that sort of experience. I kept going. And one other thing to share. Okay, squirrel, out here to make money. Okay, good. One other thing I wanted to share was paying for reviews. One of our authors who we signed a multi-book deal with, they wanted their first book in the deal to be a big splash. And they paid for one of those Kirkus reviews, and I think it was $450. And it was a huge chunk of text just totally tearing everything apart. It was horrible. And part of the stipulations, when you pay Kirkus, you cannot do one of those excerpted, thoughtful Kirkus reviews or exciting Kirkus reviews. You can't take a few words or even a big chunk. You have to use the whole entire thing. That's, at the time at least, that was part of their stipulations. So there was nothing usable out of this review. There were not even 2 or 3 words that you could subtly put somewhere that maybe Kirkus wouldn't see it. That would be together, not horrible. So that was $450 out the door for our author. And we had kind of said, that might not be a good idea, but they did it. And as it turned out, not a good idea. So that's something else to watch out for. Personally, I feel reviewers should be getting paid when they're writing reviews for publication. Paying review publications, though, kickbacks and that sort of thing is usually frowned upon in other industries. So just putting that out there. I hope I've covered a lot of the subjects related to pay for play. If there's anything that you did not hear covered today, or anything you want further explanation of, let me know. Just wanted to just briefly say that there will be a replay made available because somebody was asking me about that. It'll be for this presentation only. It won't cover anything else like the networking or what have you. So, hey, you've got to attend these things for all access. The new download, unfortunately, is not linked here in the event. So that will be emailed to all the registrants along with a link to the webinar replay. So thank you, everyone. And I'll just open it up to comments, questions, heckling, that sort of thing. If anybody has anything they'd like to put forward here. Okay. Let's see what we've got. Oh, and Sonora, hey, again, thank you for joining us. I know you were getting hit with that, big Thanksgiving lunch, it looks like. I wish I had a big Thanksgiving lunch myself. But, soon. I guess we're only a week away from that. Okay. No questions from anybody? All right. Well, if you want to, if you don't have any questions, you can jump straight over into the networking tab over on your left, and you will see options to be linked up with people, like I said, It's all totally at random, and you can exchange contact information. Wait now. Okay. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. This webinar series is valuable. Okay, great. Hey, I'm glad you think so. Thank you for joining us and being part of this. And I hope, personally, I've been hit with all kinds of fees for all sorts of things myself in the past, as both an author and a publisher. And I just want to help people avoid that sort of thing if they can. Like I said, everything is a matter of goals and what you can do with what you've got, how you can leverage things. But let's put you at the least risk possible. That's all I'm trying to put out there right now. All right. So, like I said, the email will be going out to folks with these links. And the networking tab is open, I think. And you can jump in there to meet up with other people interested in publishing, all access platform, folks who just want to, make professional connections or discuss these critical issues with other like-minded individuals. Okay, so thank you again for being here, and we will be doing another webinar next week, also free of charge. I hope to see you all there. And hey, you know what? Here's something. Let me know either in the chat or, think about it. Let me know on social media or email. What would you like to see discussed regarding ethics in publishing? What are some of your concerns about unethical behavior? Whether it's something you're worried you might have done, something that happened to somebody just general questions about the overall industry, let me know. Because, this series should be beneficial to everyone who's taking part, right? So we'll build it together, okay? All right, well, thanks for tuning in. And I will catch you next Friday for our, third Ethics in Publishing webinar. I'll see you there. I'm going to go ahead and sign out now. And maybe I'll see you in the networking. Who knows? I might just jump over there myself.